Hey, it's Erica. I just wanted to let you know that you can now listen to Global News What Happened To ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
10 years ago, when it first launched to a limited audience, it was supposed to be a revolutionary new computing platform. This technology was created to sit right on top of the nose, as the headset offered display and built-in camera, allowing users to see information and capture images in their environment. It's something out of a sci-fi movie, and while some tech enthusiasts took to it, it was so widely mocked that the term glass hole was sometimes used to describe it to people who wore it. I'm Erica Vella, and this is Global News What Happened To Google Glass. For those who may have not heard of it or seen it, Google Glass looks like a pair of safety glasses. Launched in 2013, they included voice and motion-controlled Android technology that showed up in your field of vision. I remember hearing about them, but I've definitely never actually seen the product in person. So I turned to Quinn Myers, a Chicago-based technology journalist.
I remember exactly where I was when I learned about Google Glass. I was working in a startup in the founder's basement, just a windowless basement, just grinding out media job. And this video started going around on Twitter that showed people wearing this augmented reality glasses, which I didn't even know was a thing at the time.
It's a POV video. In it, a guy gets up in the morning, puts on his glass, and goes about his day running errands, meeting up with friends. He does all of this through the lens of Google Glass. In the field of vision, notifications show up, text messages, reminders, and even directions.
I was like, wow, this is crazy. Everyone online was going nuts about it. It was so exciting. I was like, wow, okay, the future is now. Here we go. And it just had a real impact on me.
Google Glass had a lot of buzz.
So yeah, they looked like glasses, kind of much clunkier and heavy glasses. They had thick glasses arms, and then they would come up front. There was a bar right over your eyebrows, and then a lens over your right eye. And then in front of the lens, there's a little square, which was the projector. And that was the computer that would project onto the screen in front of your eye. This was a huge sticking point for Google because they wanted glass to be very seamless. They wanted people to wear these all day.
According to one of the developers behind Google Glass, the purpose was to have a future where people only rely on one screen.
They don't have a laptop. They don't have a phone. They have a screen overlay in their field of vision, which is augmented reality. Augmented reality is basically a mixing of the digital world with the physical world. So with augmented reality, it's very much in our normal day right now. You could hold up your phone and Amazon will put a coffee table in front of you. And that's augmented reality. With glass, you could do that. Potentially show directions to where you're going. You would see emails, you could read articles, you could watch YouTube, all in your field of vision without having to look down at your phone or dial it up on your computer. You could just kind of say, hey, Google, show me Twitter. And Twitter would pop up as you're staring out into space or talking to someone or doing whatever. So that is basically augmented reality and the idea behind glass.
Before long, celebrities were wearing them in photos. Kelly Osbourne, King Charles even. But probably like me, you never saw them in real life. And that's because Quinn said glass was initially only available to a small group of people.
They shipped them out to a bunch of Google software developers and stuff. But in a sense, as close as they got to a commercial release was giving them out to all these people who did the hashtag contest. So if you won the hashtag contest, technically you won the chance to purchase a pair of Google Glass for $1,500. You also had to fly yourself out to New York or San Francisco for training because no one knew how to work these things. So you would have to go to Google's lab. They would show you okay, here's how you wear Google Glass and navigate the world with them. The reception was exciting at first. Glass Explorers, as they called them, the first 10,000 chosen few to receive glass were called Glass Explorers. They would say I would walk around New York and people would come up to me and excitedly ask, like, what are these? These are so cool. Like, oh my God, like, can you see like your text messages and stuff? Very excited, like this is the future type of scenario. But then things quickly turned because it became apparent that the reality of the technology that was released to these 10,000 people was not what was kind of marketed in the months leading up to it. It couldn't do half the stuff it kind of promised it could do. And that's because Google released these as a beta product. Technically, these were a beta product.
If you didn't tweet the hashtag #IfIHadGlass and won, you were out of luck, unless you were one of the lucky few like Matt Honan, who worked at Wired at the time. He's now the editor-in-chief for the MIT Technology Review.
I was one of Wired's gadget reporters. And so we were just supposed to be really well versed on everything. And, this was an area that was, that I covered. I covered a lot of stuff in cell phones. I covered a lot of stuff around Google. This is squarely in something that I needed to be covering. And frankly, was felt behind on because other people had stories out there already.
He remembers that day. He started up his computer and saw an article on The Verge magazine.
They had a big story on it, and I was at Wired at the time, and we hadn't gotten our hands on it yet. And I remember sitting there with my editor, Mike Calore. We're just like, oh my God, not only have they seen it, but they've got this full built-out thing on it. And, from when you see a demo on stage, when you see somebody at a company showing one off, to me, I'm always a little bit more skeptical of that kind of thing than I am, when you see just a regular person or another reporter, in this case, using something. And there was a story in The Verge where they had really put it through its paces, and it seemed very, very cool. And I was intrigued and also professionally jealous. And Mike and I went out and tried to figure out how we could make sure that we had some there at Wired.
Matt wasn't part of the Google Glass Explorers program, but he got a pair to try out anyway.
I was definitely, in the very first wave of people wearing them because initially, there were the Glass Explorers who had applied for them and a handful of media people, and that was it. And they added more and more of those Explorers over time. But I remember it was one of those things that felt very it just felt very novel. Like when I was wearing it, I hadn't seen anyone else wearing it who employed by Google.
His job was to test them out and endeavored to wear them for a year to see what life was like wearing this new and up-and-coming technology.
And people were very curious about it. People were really curious about it. It reminded me of the iPhone. Like when I got an iPhone, I got an iPhone the day the iPhone went on sale. And I remember people being, super curious and coming and asking me questions about it. But it was a different kind of curiosity. Like it was a different kind of curiosity with glass. Like with the iPhone, people would come up and just be like, "Oh wow, can I play with it? Can I look something up?" And they would almost always go away being like, "Oh man, I want to get one of those." With glass, it was more like, "Can I try that?" And they would spend a couple minutes with it and they would hand it back and they'd be like, "I'm not really so sure about this."
He felt like a character out of Star Trek.
I really remember feeling like I look like a robot wearing this thing. I look like, Geordi or something. And I was honestly struck by its usefulness. And I really thought that the way that what they were attempting to do was to help you, sort of have all of these notifications and navigational features and things like that you want or that you might use your phone for, but also sort of ground you more in the real world. And I think that's still what a lot of wearable makers are doing. They were very early to it. And it was sort of successful, right? Like it was, I actually thought the software was quite good. Like some of the stuff that they were doing around, I think it was called Google Now at the time. But it was just, smart notifications, predictive stuff. It was really novel and interesting and cool.
But what did it feel like to wear them?
It was a white band that went around your temples with a small, crystal glass cube over one eye, sort of over one eye. And you had to look up and, up into the corner of your eye, kind of, to see the cube. And it was really obvious when someone is looking up at the corner of their eye. And there were even things that you could do, like to take pictures and things like that by blinking. I'm trying to remember if there's some very basic gesture types of things. It's been 10 years or whatever since I've used this. And all that stuff was really neat, right? It was neat, but it just looked so strange. And it was, I think of the, because it was so strange looking, there's an attempt by Google to like ground you in the world, but it was also very off-putting, I think, to other people. I don't recall having a negative physical experience with it. I do remember it getting warm sometimes, but I don't remember it ever being like, scary or in any way. I didn't necessarily ever think it was going to explode on my face, but it was fine. I think, it was fine. Like I didn't mind the physical sensation of wearing it at all. What I minded physically, I think, was the way that you would sort of look into the glass. Like it never really felt like something that was just floating over your vision in the way that you might imagine the future to be.
Matt wore the specs for over a year.
I definitely wouldn't wear them into places like the bathroom or anywhere else where it would be inappropriate to have a camera, right? Like it was very much a common sense kind of thing to me. But I also wouldn't wear them. I wouldn't wear them in some settings. I think it was a $1,500 device. And, so it's sort of like, I wouldn't like necessarily wear them or in places where I thought that something might happen to that $1,500 device that I wouldn't want to have happen to it. I did wear it in places that maybe weren't the smartest. Like I would wear it when I was commuting on my bike to work. I wore it in a restaurant. I wore it, sort of around town. I would wear it, in places where, to some extent, I wanted to see how other people would react to me wearing it. And what I found was that, as I think I was saying this earlier, there's like this mix of curiosity and repulsion at it.
This made me pause for a moment. Matt said Google Glass was generating a lot of buzz, but it was also causing some friction.
At that moment in San Francisco, where I live, the city was really changing, and there was a lot of other, stuff happening around the tech industry. And this was when, like the beginning of what, I think we now call the tech lash was happening. And, people have been protesting the Google buses. And there was a lot of resentment or growing resentment. That was when it was really getting underway about the effect that the big tech companies were having on the city. It's not the same place it is today. And it was a very, it was very much a way to sort of say, okay, that person's wearing glass. They got to be some tech bro asshole. And so I found that like in certain situations when I would be wearing it, and you'd see people staring at you and you would, you kind of feel that feeling of like, they're not staring at me because they're curious. They're staring at me because they're trying to make me uncomfortable.
Big tech and Silicon Valley were changing San Francisco. Rising home costs and skyrocketing rent pushed a lot of locals out of the city. Experts say to a lot of people, glass inadvertently represented the tech industry, and its $1,500 price tag created more division. It was seen as a luxury good, only exclusive to celebrities and people in the tech industry.
There was definitely a shift towards the blatant negativity, and I think that was probably about a year or so after they had first been introduced. There was one incident that I remember where a reporter for TechCrunch had someone, I believe, punch him and take his Google Glass. There was a story in the New York Times that I recall that I think there may have been a photo of me in that basically was talking about sort of the negative social consequences of and there was, but it happened pretty quickly too. It seemed like almost as soon as you started seeing them around certain parts of the city, there was this backlash to them.
A woman was at a bar in San Fran when a man allegedly ripped the specs off her face. Some establishments went so far to ban them altogether, like the Seattle bar 5 Point Cafe. Caesar's Palace in Vegas said guests wouldn't be allowed to gamble if they were wearing them. And while Matt was never physically assaulted while wearing the glasses, he does recall one incident in particular.
I took my kids to the zoo, and we were at the playground at the zoo, and I was standing in line to get, whatever, hot dog, popcorn, something at the refreshment stand right by the playground. And I heard another I presume parent, certainly adult at the zoo, standing near me and did like basically a stage whisper, like a whisper, but a designed to be heard whisper that said, "Look at that asshole," and I was just like, ugh, I'm wearing it for work, pal. I hear you. I'm wearing it for work. I didn't say anything to him. And then, like, as I was saying earlier, I'd wear it at the office and people would come up and say something to me about it. And I think in those settings, because those are the settings where people felt the most comfortable around me. These are my colleagues, my coworkers, my friends. They would not hesitate to be like, "Dude, get that off your face. I'm not going to talk to you with that on your face." I mean, people actually said that to me. Like I did hear that numerous times at various points. "I'm not going to talk to you with that on your face." People wouldn't take you seriously.
Eventually that kind of snowballs into like internet memes being that only white men wear Google Glass. So a Tumblr starts called "White Men Wearing Google Glass." There are just like infinite amounts of pictures of white men wearing Google Glass. So obviously there's some truth to it. And then a silly little portmanteau forms called Glassholes, which is, Google Glass and asshole. Sebastian Thrun said that they didn't see Glasshole coming. And that was like a major, major mistake because it just so perfectly brought together the idea that these people were assholes and associated them with Google Glass.
Tech journalist Quinn Myers says there are 3 reasons why Google Glass failed.
First was that the technology just wasn't what they promised it would be. It just didn't work as well. So even when Glass explorers who were very passionate about it, wanted this technology to work, wore it, they kind of realized like, oh, is this not what why did I pay so much money for this? The technology itself just wasn't up to snuff.
Quinn says this was a problem because Google Glass was really a beta product that needed refining, but it was being marketed as an exclusive high-end item.
When the price came out for it as $1,500, people broke down the technology and said, it should cost like around the same as an iPhone, like $700, $800, a lot of money. But, if you want people to replace their phones with this, like that's what you should price it as, not like an exorbitant amount of money, just so that it appears to be like a luxury item that like you kind of want because celebrities and athletes are wearing it. In the meantime, people know the technology isn't great and it's like a crappy product that's just overpriced.
Quinn says the final nail in the coffin centered around privacy concerns. Because just as Google Glass was being unveiled in 2013, the Prism scandal broke. Prism was a once top-secret program, and leaks suggested the National Security Agency could track the activity of foreign nationals overseas who use services from companies such as Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Apple.
The NSA and the American government had a backdoor into people's technology, could spy on Google's users and Facebook and everything like that. That rightfully freaked a lot of people out. They started to question how much of my user data is not protected on Google, on Facebook, on Twitter. People started to trust Google a lot less than they did. The same goes for the public invasion of privacy. People didn't know if other people wearing glass were recording them. They didn't like that. It upset the sort of natural social order, I guess, where you're just kind of existing and you could trust that someone doesn't have their phone out and recording you.
Matt Honan says from his perspective, hostility towards the product was its ultimate demise.
There were other things about it. It was the screen wasn't, the little cube, not really even a screen, wasn't in color. It could be hard to see. You had to adjust it. There were all these weird syncing issues, all this kind of stuff. All that could be worked out, right? There's no software for it or hardly any software for it. All that stuff can get worked out. I think that the way that it was rolled out and then became perceived as such a marker of elitism, it never was going to be able to get past that.
After 2013, Google backed away from the once innovative spectacles. By 2015, the company announced it would stop selling them until they could be more affordable and polished. That same year, Astro Teller, CEO of X, formerly known as Google X, spoke about Glass's failure at South by Southwest. He said, quote, "We encouraged too much attention for the program. We wanted to say to the world, this is an early prototype that we think is really exciting, but we also did things to encourage people to think of this as a finished product," unquote. Quinn said Google released a software update for Glass in 2019 that effectively took it offline.
It couldn't connect to any servers back at Google. It couldn't connect to the internet, essentially. So it was just a offline camera for your head that kind of worked. But yeah, like they kept it. They kept at least a couple servers running.
While Glass appeared offline, I was surprised to learn the product was still being used until recently. Quinn said it was reimagined.
So when Google Glass kind of faded from the commercial public sphere, they kind of realigned their resources to fully go into Google Glass, which is Enterprise Edition. This is like the Enterprise Edition is their glass that's made specifically for people in different industries. It was very helpful, and they continued to fine tune the technology as like more people found it useful. It's a much more focused goal than replace all screens for all of humanity. But it's worked, and it's continued to be successful. And Google has just continued to kind of quietly chug away at refining the technology. It's a lot faster. It's a lot lighter than their first Google Glass Edition was. And it's still around. And as of, I think, 2019 or 2020, members of the public could buy the Glass Enterprise version. It won't have Twitter and a lot of all the fun stuff, but you could still wear it and connect to the internet.
Google Glass was still out there, at least until March 15th, when Google Glass Enterprise announced the end. In a statement, the company said it would continue supporting Glass Enterprise Edition until September 15th, 2023. It's been 10 years since the release of Google Glass, and since then there have been other smart glasses attempts. Ray-Ban partnered with Meta and created Ray-Ban Stories, smart glasses that take photos and videos and even play music. The glasses look almost exactly like the classic Ray-Ban, and they're significantly cheaper, selling on average at around $400.
2023 is a different world than it was in 2012. But as far as like something like Google Glass coming out, now I think that the media ecosystem is very, very different and much more reliant on tech giants to kind of exist, which is to say, I think there would be less pushback. And there is less pushback when companies come out with tech that could be invasive.
Think, for example, the increase in smart speakers across households in North America.
Glass is just such a fascinating touch point for the intersection of like the online world and the offline world. People talk a lot about now like how you present yourself in the real world versus how you present yourself online. How those two, with TikTok and everything, how those two selves kind of intermix, and how, going forward, especially now, like we've got like the metaverse and virtual reality and everything, it's just becoming more and more and more of a pressing question. So when I thought of Google Glass, like this was a major point of like those two forces meeting and people having to like truly contend with the idea that like I am allowing my digital self, my Twitter, my email to literally invade my offline world. Like I will go for walks now and I will have the internet overlaid in my real world. So people really had to contend with that. And this was 10 years ago. And the public like wholly rejected it, like just full out said, we don't want this. It's a bad idea.
Quinn said for some, this wearable technology is still a point of contention.
I still think that people want a disconnect. People still want to disconnect, basically. The thing that I like about my phone is that I can, if I want to like stop doom scrolling, I can just put it in my pocket, or I can just like leave it in my apartment and go for a walk. With augmented reality, in any form, whether it's like contacts or glasses that you wear, that's not the case. Like you are allowing like the digital world and technology one step further into your personal life. And I think people will continue to protect that very, very sacred and individual right to just disconnect from the internet, disconnect from the digital world.
Matt Honan wore them for over a year, and he agrees.
I think I ultimately came around to the idea that the entire premise is sort of failed. I know that Apple is about to roll out their AR glasses, and I understand that we are inevitably moving towards a world where we're just more and more connected. But I don't necessarily think that that's a great idea. And I used to think that the way to make these devices better was by making them less noticeable, but I almost feel like it's better to be aware of them. It's better to be conscious of what these things that we carry around with us and let affect us all the time are doing. And I think that by making them more invisible, sometimes we have the opposite effect that we intend, which is we just become more enmeshed in this digital world versus the physical one that we've lived in for, many, many hundreds of thousands of years, in ways that make us some ways less human.
Global News What Happened To is written and produced by me, Erica Vella, with producer Dila Velazquez. Our audio producers are Rosalind Kafur and Rob Johnson. Also, a special thanks goes to Drew Hasselback, supervising national online journalist for Global News. Let us know what you thought of this episode, and please share it with a friend. It will help us grow the show and bring you more incredible stories. You can also help us out by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can also reach out to me personally. We are always looking for stories, so if there's a news story you want us to revisit, you can reach me on Twitter at Erica Vella or email me at erica.vella@globalnews.ca. We'll see you next time.